Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our final session of our first ever Stakeholder Integration Virtual Conference. Today we have Rachel Bierhe and Charity Horton from the Wilkinson Center and from Vocational Rehab, and they're going to be talking about working with vocational rehabilitation and workforce. My name is Olga Escamilla, and I'm one of your hosts and moderators, and we also have Deborah Hargrove as your host and moderator this afternoon. So I'm going to be going over some housekeeping slides with everyone. We'll talk about a little bit about our webinar best practices. Mute your phones at all times. Type your questions in the chat pod or raise your hand if you have a question and we want our attention, and we will get to your question. And also remember to select everyone when you post your comments or questions in the chat pod. So where it says send to, you'll change that to everyone. In terms of receiving your PD certificate for attending, everyone needs to have audio in order to receive a certificate of completion. Also, if you're sitting with someone and your name is not on the participants list, be sure you let me know so that you can get appropriate credit for attending. And at the end of the session, give it a couple of days, but you will download and print your certificate of completion via your transcripts in your account in the AEL PD portal. And if while you're viewing the presentation, if you're having a little bit of trouble seeing the PowerPoint, you can always use your tools. On the right-hand side of the screen of the WebEx, you see a diagonal blue arrow. If you'll click on those, that'll make your screen a full screen, and you'll be able to see the PowerPoint better. Again, when you're in the chat pod, you want to respond to everyone. So if you'll look down here where it says chat, all the way at the bottom, open that up, and where it says send to, you want to drop down that menu and make sure it says to everyone whenever you send your questions. And again, we do want to encourage your questions because that's why we're here. We're here for our presenters to share their information and for us to ask questions, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move our adult ed business partnerships forward is through sharing. So thank you all for being here. We have our first presenter, Rachel Bierhe, and she is the program director for 13 years at the Wilkinson Center. She has 20 years of experience in workforce development programs. She has a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's degree in science management and organizational leadership. And she's a certified manager in program improvement. We also have today with us Charity Horton, and Charity is a vocational rehabilitation counselor with Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehab Services. She's been employed with VR for 7 years, and Charity is a certified rehabilitation counselor, a CRC. She has partnered with adult education and literacy programs at the Wilkinson Center in Dallas to help Texans with disabilities. So thank you both for being here. And in case anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat pod, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with our presentation today. So welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank everyone for hanging in there. I know it's the last part of the day. This is Rachel Bierhe with Wilkinson Center, and I want to introduce Charity Horton. You can say hi, Charity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charity Horton.
Okay. So before I start our presentation, I want to stress that this partnership really started as a conversation between two employees. And so I always stress that because it's not always about how partnerships start at the very top, but sometimes really just having a conversation with someone else about the gaps in services or the needs that you may have within your program. So I'll share with you today a little bit about our organization and the services that we provide, and then Charity will share with you the services provided by Vocational Rehabilitation, and then we'll talk about our referral process and any challenges and interventions that we've come up with throughout this partnership. Okay, I'm trying to go to the next slide. Okay, So Wilkinson Center, we provide 3 areas of services. We provide adult education and literacy services, which includes English as a second language, high school equivalency, ESL, civics, IET, and then financial literacy. And then under income support, we have a food pantry through our food and emergency services, which we serve 9 zip codes in Dallas. And then anyone that's in our adult education program have access to our food pantry. And then we do financial assistance. So financial assistance includes rent and utilities, but also additional things that are considered a barrier toward employment. So it could be the cost of certifications, fees, or transportation. Sometimes we purchase uniforms for people if they needed them for work, or a CPR class. So anything that eliminates a barrier, we provide through financial assistance. And then we do financial capability, which is financial literacy in all of our adult education and literacy programs. But then we also do financial coaching, which is more one-on-one, helping people with their financial goals. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Charity.
So the next part is really discussing the vocational rehabilitation services and what our program is all about and how we are trying to assist these individuals with disabilities to help them with either being able to prepare for, obtain, retain, or helping them to advance in competitive integrated employment. The neat thing about Texas right now is a lot of states have chosen to go to what we call the order of selection, meaning that they only are serving individuals with the most severe disabilities first, and then having everyone else being placed on a waiting list in order to be able to gain any services from the Vocational Rehabilitation Office. But here in the state of Texas, we're not on any order of selection that allows us to be able to service any individual with any disability, physical, mental learning, any disability, with being able to assist them. And so the next part I wanted to do is tell you a little bit about who is all eligible for our vocational rehabilitation services. And in order for someone to be eligible for our program, they initially have an application appointment with a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and then that counselor then begins to either obtain medical records that have their existing diagnoses on it and or send them off for evaluation. The evaluations that we pay for and send off for are really catered to that person's disability. So that means we could do anything from functional capacity evaluations to learning disability evaluations to psychological evaluations, any evaluation that would yield us information to help to meet our eligibility criteria. So the first thing I look forward to see is they have a mental or physical disability that results in a substantial barrier to them being able to prepare for, obtain, or retain, or even if it affects their ability to be able to advance in employment. The next part of it is actually seeing if their barrier requires vocational rehabilitation services to help them to prepare for employment or to be able to obtain and maintain employment. And lastly, I look to see if they would be able to benefit from our services in order for them to be able to participate in competitive integrated employment after they've received whatever service we're going to provide for them through our vocational rehabilitation services. And just so you have an idea as to what all services that the Vocational Rehabilitation Program offers, I wanted to include not an all-inclusive list, but it does yield a lot of the services that we provide. I would like to say right here that every service that we provide in the Vocational Rehabilitation Program is individualized. It's definitely catered to that person's functional limitation as it results from their disability, but it also is included with their skills, their ability, their behavior, any past work knowledge that they already have. That kind of shows us exactly where they would need us and exactly what type of services we need to provide them with. Everyone in our vocational rehabilitation program will receive vocational counseling guidance. That is probably the number one service, and that comes directly from a vocational rehabilitation counselor. everyone will be assigned a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and that's their primary goal. We do purchase assessments to happen in order for us to be able to determine eligibility for our program. We also provide assistive technology devices for individuals, whether that be hearing aids to help that in person to be able to hear their employer or their co-workers, or to be able to even hear via the telephone when they're at work. We definitely provide braces and wheelchairs and prostheses and all of those things to help individuals to be able to function on the job. We also provide orientation and mobility training for those individuals who are blind. We pay for speech, physical, occupational therapy, medical treatment. We also provide them with job coaches, and that's someone to be able to go on the actual job with the person and actually go through every function of the job that that person will be doing. That happens at the actual physical location of the job. So they have someone right there with them to be able to show them each and every task that they'll be needed to do. And then once they're there for a while and the person gets the hang of it, then the job coach seemingly kind of goes away from that at that point. We do also offer return to work, job retention. Definitely a big service with us is being able to save jobs if someone already has one. Sometimes in our program we run into the fact that employers may feel like it may be not cost effective for them to purchase different items for that person in order to be able to keep them employed there. So our job in vocational rehab is to be able to take on that cost for them and allow that person to be able to remain employed at their current place of work. We also offer training and behaviors that are expected by the employers in a work environment. And typically we have what we call vocational adjustment training, and that goes over some of the soft skills that are related to going to work, but it also goes a little bit more in depth because some people haven't worked in quite a while. So we take the time to make sure that they're trained on exactly what's expected of you when you go to work, the importance of being on time and things of that nature. So we definitely offer that training in our vocational rehabilitation program. And then another thing I placed on here is assistive technology and training, how to use the hearing aids, Braille. We have a lot of low vision aids for individuals with disabilities, and then just access to information and performance of their job functions on the job. In the next portion, I want to go over exactly what the vocational rehabilitation process looks like. So if you're referring someone to an agency, you know exactly what to expect from us when they get to us. The first part is actually the initial contact, and that's the first time that the vocational rehabilitation counselor actually speaks to that person and get their initial information, name, phone number, what they know to be their disability. Some people may not have been diagnosed yet, but they realize that they do have something going on, and they've been told that from school and things of that nature, but maybe or may not have been diagnosed officially. So that's that initial conversation to see where they are. The next part of it is doing an actual application and diagnostic interview. Typically that happens in the office with the vocational rehabilitation counselor. Gives that counselor a lot of time, more time to delve into exactly what symptoms they're experiencing, what functional limitations that they already know that they have, and then also gives us a time to see if that person is already speaking with or has a doctor in place that would be able to provide us more information regarding their diagnoses. After that point, it's up to that vocational rehabilitation counselor to determine if that person is eligible for our vocational rehabilitation program. And once you're eligible for the program, the next portion we do is called assessment and planning, or comprehensive assessment activities. And what happens during this phase is we're reviewing the actual medical records or evaluations and seeing exactly what's going on with the person, and then what service that we have to meet that person's need. And we go through that in detail with that person, and that can last a little while depending on where that person is with accepting the fact that they have a disability. And then the next part is we actually develop with them an individualized plan for employment. And on that plan, it lists out exactly what's going to be a realistic employment goal for them. But also we list on there what are our objectives from doing the actual individualized plan for employment with them, their responsibilities from being in our program as far as maintaining contact with us, as far as making sure they attend the trainings, letting us know if there's something that's happened that augmented their ability to be able to participate. We outline that in their individualized plan for employment. Also, we outline exactly what our agency's responsibilities are on that plan. This plan is, I call it a blueprint, because it also gives actual dates so the person can see what's happening at all times. So they always are able to refer back to that individualized plan for employment to see where they are in our program. And from that, then we really start in this part, start actually doing services for them, whether that's obtaining that hearing aid or going to a vocational adjustment training or whatever it is. We really start doing that work in between the individualized plan for employment phase and then when they successfully graduate phase. So we're spending our time there. We stick around in that person's life for at least 3 months after they've been able to successfully obtain employment. And the reason why is because we want to make sure if there are work accommodations that are needed for them to be able to maintain that employment, that we are there to actually provide that to them. So we do stick around at least 3, and sometimes, depending on the severity of disability, we'll stick around for 6 months, And then if everything is fine up to that point, that we've actually helping to either lessen or remove their barrier to employment as it relates to their disability, after that time frame, then they successfully complete our vocational rehabilitation program.
Okay, so I'm going to take a break here. I believe there was a question that was asked earlier, but I also want to give people the opportunity to ask questions of Charity regarding the vocational rehabilitation program.
So would you like us to ask the question now?
Yes, there was a question that came up earlier.
Yes, there was. Mr. Martinez in El Paso asks, does epilepsy qualify a participant as a disability?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. As long as that person has a disability and it's affecting their ability to be able to maintain employment, definitely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, and I'm going to say just feel free if you have a question just to go ahead and ask it, and we can just take a break throughout the presentation. So our partnership originally began at our food pantry about 5 years ago. And the reason we started a partnership with vocational rehabilitation is because of the high percentage of working adults that were receiving disability checks. And so what happens in our food pantry is that when people come in, they have to provide verification of income. And what we were noticing is a lot of people on SSI. And I'm talking young people, early 20s, 30s. And when you would ask them, well, what is your disability, I don't know that they always knew exactly what it was. They were saying things like, I have bad nerves, or I'm depressed, but not really thinking about they actually have the option to work. And so when I mentioned earlier about really two employees having a conversation about gaps in services, that's really what started this, was like, okay, what is available for people that are on SSI that are young that can still work but may need some, whether it's accommodations or some additional training. And so that's really how that partnership started. And so what happened was Charity and another one of our vocational rehabilitation counselors started coming to our pantry and doing information sessions once a month. So they would come out, we would contact clients and give them the information and say, okay, they're going to come and talk to you about different opportunities that are available so that you can transition off of disability and then go into work. Again, that neighborhood has such a high poverty rate, is that we were really working with people on how do you get out of poverty? What are some of the resources that may be available so that you can go to work with additional support? And then WIOA happened. And then Charity and I had a conversation, and that's when vocational rehabilitation, when it used to be DARS, then changed. And then we had a conversation about our adult education and literacy participants, because we were also seeing the change in how we were assessing people when they first came into our program, and identifying any barriers in the very beginning before we enrolled them. And what we found out at one of our locations is that we were seeing a high number of people with disabilities, whether they were learning disabilities or mental disorders. And just to put this in perspective for you, at the one location, and I'll talk a little bit more about that adult education and literacy location, at this one location, we have students with so many barriers that I have a full-time master's degree social worker there. I have a licensed vocational counselor there that volunteers 2 to 3 days a week. And I have 2 social work interns. And that's in addition to the teacher. So we were getting slammed at that location. As we were looking through the Pearl form, we were noticing a lot of red flags, a lot of things that students were either saying to us or they've identified on that intake form. So at our orientations at Eastville College in Pleasant Grove, which is located in southeast Dallas, which is a very high poverty area as well, one of the zip codes that probably has one of the highest, along with just very low literacy rates in that area. We serve about 250 participants each year just in high school equivalency at that location. And so we decided to do a pilot at Eastville to see if we can get people the information they need about vocational rehabilitation, but then also how do we help our adult education and literacy students advance. We are all challenged with making those educational functional level gains. We're also challenged with getting the high school equivalency credential. And so we were seeing that there was a struggle at this location. So we hold orientations once a month, and that is been in practice for about 7 years, that people come to this orientation the same third Friday of every month, the same time, and then what happens is at this orientation, participants learn about the program. They fill out all the required paperwork. But you know what really happens at orientations, people come in, they're very overwhelmed. Some of them have never been to a GED program. Some of them have not been in school for years. And so there's a lot of fear that happens at these orientations. We have seen people get up and walk out of the middle of the orientation because they just said, I can't do it. We've had a participant one time in the middle of a TABE assessment just break down very loud doing the assessment and just stormed out of the door. Luckily, we had our licensed vocational counselor there who, after talking with this girl, we then realized that she had some mental health issues. She was 19 years old. She had a lot of issues. She had problems in school, and just really getting resources for her, because we realized at that time she was not ready to enroll in that program. But having Charity that comes in there once a month at the orientation, Charity comes in and she talks about the services that they provide. What are some additional options for me? Because in reality, everyone is not ready to start classes at that time. They have not dealt with the barriers they have. It could be that they have a mental illness and they are not medicated. And so we felt like that was just a perfect location. It was a perfect fit, and it streamlines really getting people the information about vocational rehabilitation and getting in contact with a vocational counselor. So our referral process, there's 2 ways we get people to vocational rehabilitation. One, I mentioned through our orientation. And so what happens at the orientation is Charity is there. She gives the information. She stays the entire orientation, including after they have completed TABE assessment. So she waits around just in case someone wants to have a conversation with her, and she talks directly to those students and answers any questions that they may have. If that happens, then Charity then will set an appointment for them. And with our population of people that we serve, we can give them a number and we can tell them to call someone, and sometimes that doesn't happen for whatever reason. Maybe they are afraid or they don't know what the right words are to say, and so that sometimes doesn't happen when we give our participants a number and say, hey, I need you to contact this counselor here to follow up and see what services they can provide. So it's really great that Charity's there once a month. She's on site. Our staff knows who she is, and so that they can make that direct contact with the person that they're going to have that initial meeting with. The other part of that is that having our social worker there as well. And so with social work, it's not only about linking people to services, but also being that advocate for them. Because there's been times, again, our participants go into an agency and it's so big, or some type of government agency, and then they just don't know the right words to say or to know exactly what to ask for. And so that social worker is there to hold their hand, link them to it, and then maybe give Charity some additional information that maybe the participant may have not shared or just didn't think to tell Charity. We do have our participants sign a release of information so that our social workers can then have that contact with Charity. One thing we do is just make sure our teachers don't get involved in all the referral process and the details of it. The other way someone comes into our program, it gets sent to vocational rehabilitation, is at our smaller sites where Charity does not go. So what happens is sometimes it's the teacher that identifies that there may be an issue or see the red flag. And then when the teacher identifies it, then the teacher can contact the case manager that's assigned to their location, and then that case manager will then send the referral to Charity. And so it works a little different in that sense where they don't meet her on site, but then our case manager makes sure that the client understands this is someone that's a partner, someone that we trust, to make sure that you're getting the services that you need. So we still make sure that the handoff is very seamless, so that our clients then will go and make sure that they follow up on those referrals. And Charity, I'm going to let you take it from here as far as what happens at the orientation.
Okay, so after I presented the orientation, the next part, as Rachel said, is that I actually meet with the participants at that point to figure out, and sometimes they don't want to say because we're in there with a big group. They don't want to say exactly what's going on, so I get to talk to them one-on-one to see where they are, if they've already identified that they have a disability or if they've been told. A lot of times they have told me, well, I went to high school, the teacher didn't understand, so I just decided I was just going to quit, and so I don't know if you'll be able to help me, but that's where I'm at. And so I get a chance to kind of talk with them and tell them a little bit more about our vocational rehab program. Also, sometimes they've been told so much that if I receive Social Security benefits that I can't work. So they've already automatically said I can't work. So it's my job at that point to just educate them on the fact that they can work. It's just the fact that we'll just have to go about it perhaps in a different light, maybe not start off full time. depending on if they receive SSI, SSDI. So I take time to actually answer that question for them at that point, so they'll feel okay enough to meet with me or meet with one of my colleagues. And then from there, I ask them to come to an application appointment where I then begin getting more information regarding what they think is their disability. And if they already have a physician going on, then get a chance to get that information from about the treating physician so I can get in that person's life. A lot of times from my referrals I've seen from there, though, I've been having to send off for additional assessments to be had. And the neat thing about that is once I get that assessment back, I'm able to determine not only that they're eligible for our program, but I'm also able to have them to sign an agreement so I can be able to share that information, at least the recommendations, with the Wilkinson Center so they'll be able to get the accommodations that they need on the actual GED test. So that's been one of the biggest things that I've seen that I've been able to do, that we've been able to do by allowing them to be in our program. And then after that, then we kind of include the Wilkinson Center as part of their individualized plan for employment. That really helps because I'm able to have an ally there. I can always check when I don't hear back from the person. I can check with their case manager and vice versa. And having that communication has been wonderful because we've been able to help keep that customer engaged. I've actually made a phone call today with someone that same way. So it's very good to be able to see that. But so after that, we really start doing that. And then once they're able to obtain their GED and we're able to get perhaps whatever training that they're in need of, or if they're needing us for assistive technology down the road, then we're able to provide that service for them and then kind of help them problem solve and see exactly how we can help them as it relates to going to work at that point.
And so while they're going through the vocational rehabilitation process, they are still enrolled in our adult education and literacy services. So they are still attending class. They are still getting all the other services. But like Charity mentioned, it's good to have that ally because sometimes they disappear from us. And so then calling Charity and say, hey, have you seen this person? Have they been in contact with you? Because we want to show to the client or to the participant is that we are a united force and that we are working together to help them to, meet whatever goals they had when they came into the program.
Rachel, we have some questions.
Sure.
Liz in El Paso is asking, how do they connect with VR services?
Through our program, it is because Charity is our direct contact. They everyone through our program, we refer directly to Charity. I don't know if I answered the question, but
well,
on our end.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying from our end, but Charity, how do they connect directly with vocational rehabilitation?
Well, I'm going to put a link down here as well. So the only thing that would have to do is actually go to the website, the link I just put down there, and that will outline exactly all the zip codes because we were divided out in different zip code areas, and certain offices service certain zip codes. And we're right now in the process of co-locating with our Texas Workforce Solutions partner, so we're making one big happy family here. So if you definitely, you can choose the one that's closest to them, and that way they're able to link up with a vocational rehab counselor and get the process started.
Okay, great. And we had one more question, if I could. What type of assistance does Voc Rehab provide for students going to college? Can students get assistance if they're in a certificate program?
Yes, I have in the past provided a variety of things. Sometimes it may be, especially for individuals who are experiencing hearing loss and things of that nature, we've assisted them with being able to get not just hearing aids, but a different assistive technology to utilize in the classroom while they're there to have that support. And also they can, of course, use that once they move on towards work as well. And then we also help them by learning how to locate different resources wherever their colleges are that it's catered to the disability. So they're definitely involved in our vocational rehab program at the same time pursuing whatever certification that they're going for.
I believe that's all we have for right now.
Okay. So I want to just walk through a participant example so you can see the flow from the participant's point of view. So they come to our orientation and we do enrollment. As I mentioned, the Pearl form. And when they changed that to include the questions about the disabilities, that helped us even more identify, to better identify people that could be potential referrals. And so our staff will look at those Pearl forms and see if we pick up anything where they acknowledge that there was some type of disability, whether it's physical, whether it's learning, whether it's mental. We will catch that on our end. Also, our case managers will meet with participants, and as you can see that where it says student one-on-one assessment, so our case managers meet with most of our participants. I would probably say maybe 75% of them would have had at least one conversation with a case manager or an intern. And in that one-on-one, we ask questions such as, when you were in school, did you have trouble learning? We look at learning styles inventory. We look at TABE scores. And so we try to pick up anything that may give us an indicator that this person may be a potential referral. The other way that happens sometimes is from the teacher. So a teacher may have someone sitting in class, and I'll give you an example. We had a young lady who was in our class, had a little over 200 hours in our program. So she came in very low. I want to say maybe it was an NRS level 2. She would make a gain, and then she would drop again. She would make a gain, and she may then not make a gain at all, and then she would drop. And so it was just almost like a roller coaster. And so when the teacher was like, okay, there's something why she's having a difficult time learning, that is someone that is a potential vocational rehabilitation referral. And so the teacher will then look at that and say, okay, let me contact the case manager and let's see if it's someone that may meet the criteria. And so when that happens on the 101, we again ask about school history. We also ask about employment history. Sometimes employment history will give us an idea if there's anything that may have been missed when they were in the public school system. It could be someone who maybe lost jobs because they were terminated because of performance, and then asking the more detailed question, okay, what was it about your performance? Was it, I couldn't catch on to something, or I kept making a lot of mistakes, or I didn't understand, the written instructions. And so we really look at if there's anything that stands out in their employment history that may be an indicator that there may be more to it. And I already mentioned the TABE assessment. And then we just also, because we have social workers, really go into a little bit more history. Now, I won't say that we do that with every single person, but people that we see red flags, those are the ones that we really get more into some details and a little bit more of their history. What we found sometimes is in these conversations, and Charity briefly mentioned it, is that there's an embarrassment sometimes. And so we don't always get that at the orientation. If we identify red flags and then, from their end, they then go to vocational rehabilitation and go through all of the process of getting that disability documented. Now, a little bit about the testing accommodations, because this is a high school equivalency site, and our students do need to take the GED test, and so we really work with them once they get that documentation back on helping them write the letter they need to contact GED Testing Service to get that accommodation they may need. So as Charity mentioned, we've had several like that. That has been a huge help. We actually had one that got her GED that has those accommodations because sometimes they just maybe need extended time. They may need additional breaks. It could be They need to be in a testing center by themselves without any other people in there. And so we get the teacher involved in that part of it so that the teacher can understand what is going on. We are very careful about what goes in the adult education and literacy file because it is sensitive information, and because our teachers have access to those files. We don't want things about severe mental illness in the files. Those assessments we don't put in the file, but we do have a conversation with the teacher about things that they may specifically need to know that's going to help their instruction. And so we are, very selective on what information the teacher needs to know so that we can still respect that person's privacy while they're in the program. So, of course, with any pilot or any new program we do, there's always challenges. And one of it, again, is participants not even aware of learning disabilities or embarrassed to acknowledge that they have one. And so we've seen this where people had no idea that they had anything wrong because they were never tested in school. So if you think about some of our students that were older before things like state assessments and that was back in the day when people were just being promoted. And so they were never flagged as having anything that may be an indicator that there was a learning disability. And so they went through life, and then they worked, and they lost jobs, and they couldn't figure out. They would go to school, and they would, stop going. And so just really now when they have a conversation with our case manager, thinking, okay, there's got to be more to it. And the other part is that people are just sometimes just embarrassed by it. They think that there's something wrong with them, and we reassure them that it's just something that you just learn differently, or you may just have an additional barrier that we have to try to figure out. Okay, how do we get some support for you so that you can continue into the program. Another challenge is keeping appointments. So this was something that we did not see coming in the very beginning. We just assumed, hey, Charity's there, let's make the appointment, they're aware of the appointment, and then they don't show up. And those appointments cost vocational rehabilitation money, whether they show up or not, and they're very expensive assessments. And so now our case managers, they make sure that they know when that participant's appointment is, that they remind the participant before, hey, make sure you go to your appointment. If you can't make your appointment, you need to contact Charity so that she can get it rescheduled. The next thing is a challenge, which may sound like it shouldn't be a challenge, but it is that vocational rehabilitation focusing on employment. Employment is the goal for them. Employment is also our goal, but of course we want to make sure people get their high school equivalency or the skills that they need before they go into employment. And so that's just keeping that in mind, that is the goal. And then also our teachers not having enough training to work with participants with learning differences. This is something that programs just struggle across the board. We're starting to see more and more of these participants that are struggling in our classes. And so our teachers are sometimes feeling overwhelmed because they're like, okay, great, now we know what the issue is. Now what do we do about it? We have no training at all. How do we help this participant? And so not always feeling that diagnosis really helps them to be a better instructor. And so our interventions, of course, are, as I mentioned, our case manager now just makes sure they remind the participants of the appointment. Charity mentioned about the communication between her and the case managers. That has gotten a lot better, so that now that they feel like they're on a team versus Charity works for this other agency. that she is really part of our team in helping our students to succeed. The other part of this is, as I mentioned, people becoming employed. And we've seen this time and time again where that's great. They get a survival job because they need to survive. They need to pay bills. And then they stop coming to our program. And so now what we've done is our case managers work with them and say, okay, do you need an evening location? Or if they're in an evening class and they get a day job, then we say, okay, do you need a daytime location? And if we don't have that class available, we're in a consortium where we have partners where we can send them. Maybe we send them to Dallas County Community College where there is a location that's a little closer to them. And then we also have distance learning for our high school equivalency. And so really working with them, and we have probably about 20 right now that are actively doing distance learning because they got a job and they couldn't continue to come to class. And so when we put people in the distance learning program, we make sure that they have the skills they need, and also offer them access to any of our locations that have a computer lab. And so even if they can't come to our location, if they have some time in their schedule, look, we have this location over here in West Dallas. We have a computer lab. Would this be, a good location? We're located in 3 public library sites. And so if our students are at the public library sites, then they have access to computers, on the weekends and the evening times, the daytimes, whenever they have that opportunity. So we really make sure that they have the skills they need before putting that plan in place for our students. And then our case managers and teachers are working more closely together on retention strategies. And honestly, this has been such a challenge because you have teachers who want to, take charge of their own class and don't want the extra people in it and not really seeing that they are of some help. But we've gotten a lot better to the point where they have a plan that they work together on that helps the client so that they see that it's a team effort. And so when a teacher is struggling, sometimes the case manager may come in and say, okay, let's figure out what additional resources may be available for the student so that they don't stop out. Okay. So now I'd like to turn it over to any questions we may have. No questions or comments?
Nope, not yet. Feel free to type them in the chat pod, y'all. Boy, how was that for Texas twang?
I know.
Sorry. It's been a long afternoon.
It is a very long afternoon, and I hope our listeners are still there.
They certainly are. They certainly are.
Thank you for that, Leslie. I'm glad you still are with us. Okay, so let me just throw a question out there. Can I throw a question out there?
No, go ahead.
Okay. How many people are working with a vocational rehabilitation counselor now? You can raise your hand. Okay, no one. If you're not, I would strongly encourage you to really consider it. If you're running into a brick wall, find out where the vocational counselors hang out. Where do they go to meetings? If there is any community meetings that they're at, I say this so many times that things really happen on the front line level, and then work its way up. Being from on both sides as a frontline employee and as a program director, I can tell you sometimes stuff sits with us. So we'll meet with people and have an idea, and then it could be a while before it gets to frontline people. And so my suggestion is if it doesn't work going from to the top, then try going at a different level.
And then also, Rachel, every I guess you could say every region in Texas has what they call a regional director. And if you can get a hold to the regional director, they would definitely make sure someone within vocational rehabilitation will be meeting with you very soon, because it's definitely a big partnership, and we all have the same goal in mind, which is helping that person to eliminate barriers. So we definitely want to make sure you're able to get to us. But if you can't get us via that location, definitely reach out to that regional director, and I'm assured somebody will be in contact with you.
But I can tell you it's made a big difference in our high school equivalency program as far as retention, as far as graduates. That assessment, I don't know if people know how much that assessment costs, but I had a relative to take it a few years ago to pay out of pocket. It was $1,800. And so it's a very expensive assessment. It's very thorough. And so it is a resource that is sitting there that our clients can definitely benefit from. And so my advice to you to streamline it is if you can get someone to come on site, similar to what Charity does, that saves the turnaround time. I would say, what is it, about 2 weeks, Charity?
Oh, yes. We definitely try to make sure they're in within 2 weeks, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Versus them calling, going, through a voicemail, and then that vocational counselor has a bunch of other clients. It's just, if you can get that person on site, that makes a world of a difference. Okay, I don't know if anybody else has any questions.
I don't see any questions. I see Risa said, I really like the intervention that starts right away. So, awesome. I think people are just surprised about the cost of those tests, and I do know that they're costly. They're pretty expensive to our students, our participants, and this is a great resource to be able to get them the help that they need in determining those, taking those tests. So, yes. So if there are no other questions, I know we'd like to have wait time, but if there are no other questions, we want to thank Rachel and Charity very much for providing all this information, a lot of great information about your partnership, and I really appreciate it because that gives others ideas and just to be able to know that these partnerships can be developed and there are individuals out there that can assist our students in terms of the vocational rehabilitation piece. So thank you so much for sharing, and we appreciate you being available to participate in our first ever Stakeholder Integration Virtual Conference. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. My pleasure.